We are now on with a very interesting session, Approach to a Breathless Infant, a common day presentation for all of us. The moderator for this session would be Dr. K.R. Ghosh Uttam. Lead discussant would be Dr. Arun Manglik. And the panelists for this session would be Dr. Parthopratim Bora, Dr. Shumantro Sarkar, Dr. Anil Sachdeva, Dr. Debjani Gupta.
So a very good morning to the August gathering here. So we will, in the coming 40 minutes, we will have a we'll have 4 interesting cases and we will deal with this breathless infant. And to begin with, I would like to introduce my panelists. All of them are very known to all of you. And we have Dr. Anil Sachdeva sir. He's the director and PICU and pulmonology and co-chairperson, chairman of pediatrics, Institute of Child Health and Gangaram Hospital, Delhi. We have Dr. Debjani Gupta, our own Debjani Di, and she is the senior consultant of Narayana Hospitals and Zenith Super Specialist Hospital. We have Dr. Parthopratim Bora. He is attached to this Pratiksha Hospital, Guwahati, Assam. And we have Professor Shumantro Sarkar, who is the HOD of Diamond Harbour Government Medical College Hospital of West Bengal. And of course, we have our very senior and respectable Dr. Manglik, who is the president of, who was the president of WBAP and also the president of the Neonatal Society, and is very senior consultant pediatrician in our city. And me, the moderator for this, is mainly a NICU in charge, an associate professor of ICH. So now coming to the topic, so this is a breathlessness. Breathlessness or respiratory distress occurs when the breathing does not match the required oxygen demand of the body. It may be due to failure of oxygenation, or it may be due to failure of ventilation, or it may be a combination of both. And what are the common causes we see? Of course, it mainly involves the respiratory tract, and being in the developing country, infection is the major cause, is the most important cause of this respiratory distress. Now, infection can be in the upper airway, like croup, epiglottitis, and so on, or it can be bronchiolitis or pneumonia. Asthma is very, very important, and sometimes anaphylaxis is important, but as you know, we can have early wheezes, but asthma is relatively we see in our older children. Foreign body, though very uncommon in the first 6 months, but can occur in 6 to 10 months because 6 to 12 months of age because of so many, they play with toys. Airway anomalies, as we have discussed in many of the sessions in this Respicon, are very, very important cause of respiratory distress. Trauma, flail chest, pneumothorax can cause breathlessness, and of course, rarely smoke or chemical agent exposure. Now, as we are dealing with breathlessness in infant, cardiovascular cause is a very, very important factor. The congenital cyanotic heart disease, often they manifest as breathlessness when they go into heart failure. Also, you can have acquired myocarditis and arrhythmias. Neurological causes, when the CNS is at fault. You know, the basic pathophysiology of breathlessness is hypoxia, hypercarbia, or there may be a difficulty in control of ventilation. That occurs in neurological causes when the CNS is at fault, or it may be due to muscular causes when there is hypotonia, and that leads to poor reflexes and there are recurrent aspirations. And metabolic endocrinal causes due to acidosis, metabolic acidosis, as we frequently see in decay. I think anyone who does PICU will see, we have seen many cases decay, all coming with respiratory distress, or inborn errors of metabolism when they come with metabolic acidosis, and sometimes endocrinal like CH. Hematologic cause, though often we try to neglect this, it may be because whenever there is a defect in delivery of oxygenation, like severe anemia, like methemoglobinemia also can present with this, and GI causes like acute abdominal distension, acute pancreatitis may also cause. So with such a huge causes, it's very difficult to cover all these things in this 40 minutes. So I have chosen 4 interesting cases which causes some diagnostic dilemma, and all of them presented with respiratory distress. So the first one is a male baby which was delivered, a late preterm baby. So we thought of initially TTN or RDS. The birth weight was 2.49 kg. There was respiratory distress soon after birth. Uneventful antenatal history, antenatal USG was normal, no congenital malformations of the lungs. There was a history of second-degree consanguinity among the parents, and the baby was initially given oxygen but not mentoring saturation and was so referred to our unit. We saw marked tachypnea, grunting. The saturation was only 85% in room air. There was subcostal retraction, bilateral crepitations. So all of these are showing the pathology is in the lungs. It's you're getting pulmonary pathology. So S1 or S2 audible, no murmurs, neurological examinations was normal. And the initial blood gas shows pH to be 7.28 with a PCO2 of 61, bicarbonate being 27, and this is the blood counts. You can see CRP is normal, counts is more or less normal, you can say 15,000, and electrolytes were normal. And this was the initial chest X-ray. Yeah, it's quite visible. So may I ask Dr. Sachdev, sir, so what are you dealing with, and how we will proceed to stabilize this baby?
If you go into the history once again, it is suggestive of an acute episode, acute event which is leading to increased work of breathing, and the blood gas is also showing type 2 respiratory failure because the saturations are not maintained and the PCO2 is high, and there is some compensation by increase in bicarb. So there is a partially compensated respiratory acidosis. And the onset is very early in this child. So the possibility, as told you, that the infections are very common. So we think of some infection, some congenital pneumonia in this child. If you see X-ray carefully, there is some haziness on the right side, especially in the upper and lower zones, and maybe there is some haziness, opacity evolving on the left upper zone also. So it seems that the child requires some stabilization. So since the child has respiratory distress, I would like to start this child on some respiratory assist devices, which may be in the form of high flow nasal cannula or nasal non-invasive ventilation, depending on the availability of equipments, and keep a very close watch, maintain his hemodynamics, and watch for the improvement in the child's respiratory work of breathing, because if there is no improvement, then I have to take next step. So that is how I am going to stabilize this child and send initial investigations which have already been done. And more than blood and X-rays repeatedly, if I have a facility for the ultrasound chest, I would like to do that and follow it up in the subsequent course of the illness.
Yes, sir. So will you give antibiotic to this baby, Dr. Debjani?
Yes, I would. And I would justify it by saying that although this is a late preterm without the high-risk factors, we have a baby who is going into respiratory failure, has chest crackles, deranged blood gases, opacification on both sides of the hemithorax, right more than left. So after taking some sample for blood cultures, I would start my first line of antibiotics.
Yeah, and as Dr. Sachdev suggested, we also do an ultrasound, and this was quite classical. The ultrasound also showed there was consolidation. So we went on the first line antibiotic. Baby was initially put to CPAP, but after a few hours, there was clinical deterioration and worsening of the blood gas, and the baby was put onto ventilator. And this was the X-ray, repeat chest X-ray was done, and the repeat blood count, though not justified to do such quickly, but often we do, because if we're doing very early, we often miss the rising CRP titers. So it was done, and the CRP came out to be now 93 with a count of 19,300 and the neutrophil of 76, very well matching with the sepsis-like features. So will you upgrade the antibiotic, Dr.
See, looking at this scenario, your child is just 24 hours into admission and treatment, and we have just started with the antibiotics. And I think it's too early to upgrade an antibiotic. So I think we should stick to the antibiotic. Rather than that, we should look at the causative factor. By this time, if you could find out, or if the child requires further other supportive management, and that should be more emphasized rather than upgrading the antibiotics.
Yes, the point is very well taken. Rather than just changing the antibiotic, we should have the tendency to give a supportive care and wait for the blood culture. And so initial backtake was negative and urine routine culture was also negative. Day 4, the baby was not improving. Now what should you do, Dr. Shumantru?
Yes, in this condition, if the baby does not improve, that means we have to think whether the line of treatment what we have already started, whether it was not working or working. So the ventilatory setups, all whatever we have given, we have to check for that. And moreover,
So
we
had
have to
it been a
think.
pneumonia, the baby should have
Yeah.
improved with a sensitive antibiotic.
Exactly. So if the patient doesn't improve, then we have to think whether we are missing something. Is there anything else that could be the possibility? So we can go for the further chest X-ray, and we can go for echocardiography, and again you can send the culture for the that is from the bronchoalveolar lavage
Yes.
to get the exact etiology of that particular.
Often we miss blood culture, so we have to send a bronchoalveolar lavage. But look at we repeated the X-ray. So anything very specific, can you notice all the audience? The haziness, the opacity has shifted to the other side, okay? So this is and also as told by Dr. Shumantru, we send a bronchoalveolar lavage culture, which grew Enterococcus durans. Antibiotic was changed to teicoplanin according to the sensitivity. Echocardiography was normal, ultrasound abdomen was normal, because as there was a changing pneumonia, we were thinking of something. Repeat backtake was also negative. Baby was kept in left up position and chest physiotherapy started. After 48 hours, there was again a change in the side. See, it was right side to begin with, left. Now, after 48 hours, again the left-sided opacity has resolved and the right-sided opacity has started. So what are your thoughts now, Doctor?
There is a shifting atelectasis from one side to the other side, and there is a possibility of intraluminal obstruction in this child. So I would like to put in a bronchoscope, but the practical problem in this child ET tube, endotracheal tube will be of 3.5 size or something, and the smallest bronchoscope with suction available, my unit is 2.8. So in this child, I would like to put in a laryngeal mask airway and provide him ventilation along with do the bronchoscopy through the LMA. And there is a possibility there is a mucus plug which is moving from one side to other, or there is a blood clot. So that is what I need to rule out before I think of doing some very sophisticated tests. So shifting of atelectasis from one side to the other side, possibly something is moving from right main bronchus to left main bronchus and then again to right main bronchus. So that is my thought process at this point of time.
Yeah, so Dr. Debjani, as sir was suggested, we also had bronchoscopy facilities, but it's not so for such a baby with endotracheal intubation already done. So did you have anything? Can you do anything else?
I think it's
Suppose this facility is not at all available.
Yeah, I think it's a very common problem that we face in a lot of our institutes. A lot of thoughts come into our head, but resource-wise, infrastructural things-wise, we may not bring everything to completion. So if we kind of look back a little bit and think about what am I dealing with? I'm dealing with some sort of a shifting atelectasis, okay, bronchoscopy if possible, but I need to kind of go further than that and think that, what can I do? Am I looking at immune deficiency? In this era of genomics, would I have access to doing further genomic tests on this baby, which would give a clue to the etiological diagnosis? So some such, getting an immunological profile in a late preterm may not. It is not always that easy. Some centers have the access to a wonderful geneticist and to sending samples off. So I would try that. Yeah.
Yeah, so as we didn't have any access to bronchoscopy in these young children, and we didn't have these facilities to do as suggested by, so we thought of doing a genetic sequencing. As my previous speaker also mentioned, this is now the investigation of choice when you think of something genetic disorders and when you are quite sure it's matching with your things. So it was planned and we have that facilities. We do it we send it to one of the labs and they do it very cheap for us. And because we suggested this, because collapse was changing, there was a family history of cardiac disease among the siblings, and there was a second-degree consanguinity, and so this was a highly suspicious of primary ciliary dyskinesia, but the thing which was not matching, there was no situs inversus or any cardiac lesion. So we sent, meanwhile the baby was managed conservatively, and to our surprise, we get the report, this was a heightened gene abnormalities, which is primary ciliary dyskinesia. The baby was homozygous for it, and so that clinched to a diagnosis. So baby was continued with ticoplanin, postural changes done 4 hourly, chest physiotherapy was given 4 hourly. This is the repeat X-ray. As you can see, there is marked improvement. We actually discharged the child with proper counseling and monitoring guidelines. Can any one of you, just quickly, because we are running short, highlight the key points in counseling such a child? Because these are chronic disorders. It may not be that bad as a cystic fibrosis, but it's a chronic problem.
First, wonderfully managed patient, and the best part was that the presence of consanguinity, family history, all pointed to the diagnosis. And as Dr. Sachdev pointed out, there could have been a mucus plus which was shifting, but the pointer was the consanguinity and the family history, which puts you towards going into genome sequencing, thinking of some sort of a ciliary disorder. Well, counseling will be very important here because we need to tell the parents that this is not a one-off issue. This is going to be a long-term battle. This is repeatedly the child may suffer these sort of issues, and the child will be, they need to have particularly the issue of drainage and the chest physiotherapies will have to be done in the first event of the child having some sort of symptoms like cough and all. And at the same time, they might even ask for subsequent siblings if they may be affected. And since there is consanguinity and we know this is a autosomal condition, we definitely have to counsel on those lines also. So this counseling session will have to be a fairly long one, not something what I've been talking about in the last 1.5 minutes maybe. It'll be quite long. Thank you very much for this case.
So this baby, in fact, in our follow-up, already had 2 admissions in the PICU, but okay, still going. So coming to this case 2, we have to hurry up a little bit. This is a term baby which came with respiratory distress for 2 days at the age of 21 days. Okay, and this was the X-ray. CRP was 73 with a count of 4,350. We started with oxygen, IV fluid, and antibiotic. Baby deteriorated rapidly, intubated and ventilated. And this was the season of November 2022, the last year around this time. And antibiotic upgraded, blood culture was no growth, but there was no clinical improvement. So basically what you are thinking of, so when a baby having a pneumonia is not improving on 21 days.
We have a term baby presenting with cough, cold, fever. So we think about a late onset sepsis definitely, and most likely is a pneumonia. And if in a setting of, in November setting that you have seen, and last year, you're seeing a lot of viral pneumonia cases, mostly adenovirus, RSV virus infections that are coming up. And
so knowing that, what are the things you will ask, Dr. Shumantro?
Yeah, we have to ask whether in the family some of the siblings are suffering from the same disease. So it could be a viral onset. As Dr. Partho said, it could be a late onset sepsis also. So these factors we have to assess.
Absolutely.
And the other things like GRD and the history of cyanosis to rule out any congenital heart disease, that is also you have to think of.
So this baby did get a history of a sibling suffering from viral cold and cough. So can X-ray help in differentiating, sir? Because there was...
Yes, there are certain features, but there is a lot of overlap between the viral and bacterial pneumonia, especially in the early stages. So if you have a lobar consolidation, it points towards bacterial infection. If you have cavitating lesion, breakdown, necrotizing pneumonia, it is definitely indicates bacterial infection. If you have multi bilateral involvement on both sides, and this is more of interstitial pattern that points towards the viral pneumonia. Ground glassing points towards the viral pneumonia. So, but whenever you are interpreting the X-ray, uh, keep the clinical history in perspective. That's very important. And second is follow the x-rays. Maybe initially something is looking to you like a viral pneumonia and then going on to the bacterial pneumonia. So maybe a second x-ray or third x-ray will give you clarity. But there is overlap, but certain features are more commonly seen with bacteria as compared to viral pneumonia.
So very clear-cut message. There may be overlap. So don't just thinking that it is a lobar consolidation. Viral pneumonia cannot occur. This is a very wrong thing. So there may be overlap. So will you send viral PCR in this baby? I think Dr. Debjani will agree to it.
The answer is short and simple. Yes, I
Yes,
would.
and-
And seeing that the baby is intubated, PCR from the bowel fluid. But having said that, even if a baby is intubated, you could send off a PCR from the nasal swab
So
as
the
well. Yeah.
dictum is you have to see whether it's an upper airway pathology or a lower respiratory tract pathology. If it's upper respiratory tract pathology, NP swab is a better option. But when you are thinking of lower respiratory pathology, the sample should be more close to the anatomical area. So go for a bronchoalveolar lavage, that will give a better yield. So to cut short, the baby, this came out to be a RSV positive. So will you give ribavirin? And what actually, just you can say, what is the role of ribavirin in RSV virus?
See, if I have to talk from my own experience, we have never used ribavirin in our
So any one of you
in
have
institute.
used?
But again, see, this is a drug which has been recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics long time back. But I think this drug is available in three formats. It's aerosolized form, there's an IV form, there's an oral form. I think the IV and the aerosolized form is not available. Again, this has to be given for a long period of time, and it carries its own side effects. And again, ribavirin is only indicated in infants or babies who are immunosuppressed, who has a bone marrow transplant, an organ transplant, or has got are more prone to severe diseases. And these are the indications, basically.
So this baby, though it was given as given ribavirin is only indication. The supportive care is the mainstay of the therapy. It is only given in an immunocompromised child or a very critically sick you can give. And the very important thing I would like to highlight, in tropical countries, we have an outbreak specially associated just after the rainy season of this RSV. And the epidemic peaks are not as sharp as the temperate climates, where it is mainly in the winter. So keep a watch. Now, after the rainy season, you get a lot of cases of this RSV viruses. Now moving to our case 3, which is a very, very interesting case.
Just a minute, ring this patient,
Yes.
This RSV thing was very simple. I mean, we have this opportunity of doing the PCR so frequently nowadays because of the option available. And we could come to a conclusive diagnosis. Ribavirin, yes. I don't know whether ribavirin treated the patient or the patient improved only on your supportive therapy.
So that's why
So that's a big question. So giving the message should not be going that ribavirin is the panacea for RSV.
Absolutely.
And another
Supportive
bit
care
of
should be
information is we have the RSV vaccine now on the horizon. It's available in the US. If I tell you the cost, you'll jump in your chairs. Each dose costs $350.
Yes, I think it was available long back. Even when I was in US, we used to give RSV prophylaxis vaccine. So, but the
One
thing
second,
is, I
before-
would like to say the take-home message is you should not use ribavirin unless it is a very critically ill or a immunocompromised baby or received bone marrow transplantation or some hematopoietic transplantation. So a very interesting case, a 4.5-month-old boy presented with a complaint of recurrent on-and-on fever for last 1.5 months, cough and cold for the same duration, gradually progressive abdominal distension, shortness of breath, and failure to thrive. There was a long history. To cut it short, the baby was admitted repeatedly, received IV antibiotics, nebulization, initially diagnosed as Walry, then diagnosed as pneumonia. One of the physicians could find multiple physicians. One of the physicians found it to have a hepatosplenomegaly and a pallor also. He referred it from district, referred to a Calcutta, to one of the nursing home in the private hospitals in Calcutta. They started with IV meropenem and IV vancomycin, seeing at the bad X-ray. But the child's condition further deteriorated, and we got this child at this stage. So what are your first thought and how to proceed further, sir?
So, going back into the history, it is suggestive of some, it's a prolonged history, so it's not an acute event. And the patient has received multiple antibiotics with what I can think of that there is some partial improvement. The child was never completely well in between the episodes,
Yes.
right? So this is an ongoing process. So I
Actually,
would
the
like
child
to
was
keep,
never very well, never gained weight
so
adequately.
it's a chronic infection,
chronic, yeah.
problem which is going on. So possibilities that come to mind is a chronic infection, maybe some tuberculosis, or there is a possibility of the history of contact was there or no?
There was no positive history of contact. None of the
There was
family
no-
members were
there was no
suffering
history
from
of contact.
tuberculosis.
So we have to think of some aerodigestive disorders in a small child like this. So reflux disease may be considered in this child. So go into the history of choking or repeated vomiting, frequent vomiting or exposure to some pollutants or something. So I have to go into the details of the history again and then go further for the investigations.
So the detailed history doesn't reveal much. Only thing is that the mother had a history of 2 abortions, both in the first trimester. The baby was immunized properly, and on examination at our hospital, we could find microcephaly, pallor. There was a bilateral subcostal severe retraction, bronchial breath sounds, hepato and splenomegaly. Fundus was normal. CNS-wise, the baby was developmentally normal, but very, as I said, cachectic look with an irritable look. The baby now had a very stormy hospital course, deteriorated within 12 hours, and was shifted to PICU. Initially was admitted to the ward. And the CRP was sky high, 147.5 with a count of 14,900 with predominant neutrophil 66 and lymphocyte 32. The hemoglobin was also low, as in any chronic infection. The cholesterol was added and inotropes supposed to added. I'm not going into why cholesterol was added, which was most likely it was not supposed to be, but we are not going into that discussion. So during PICU stay, they have a persistent bradycardia, frequent episodes of hypothermia, and this was the X-ray, such a bad X-ray. So any additional investigation you would like to do? And why do you think there is bradycardia and frequent episodes of hypothermia?
Okay, if I kind of just take the cookies out of the case history. So I have a baby who is microcephalic, who is low birth weight, who's been unwell for 1.5 months, has had numerous
In fact, 3
hospital...
months, the thing started from 1.5
Yeah,
months.
has had numerous hospital admissions, numerous courses of antibiotics, has ended up in the PICU with a grotty X-ray, which shows mottling on both sides, and has a tube down, and is now bradycardic and is not maintaining temperature. So would obviously require further investigations. Let's start with the basics. You need some electrolytes on this
The
baby.
electrolytes were normal.
Electrolytes
Because we have
were-
already given corrections.
Right.
Yeah.
Any baby, we are not getting a handle on the respiratory distress. You would need a bedside echo. You would need to know the cardiac state.
Echo was normal.
That's good. I don't know if it's good or not bad, but well, it's good for the time being. The baby is bradycardic. You need a bit of maternal history. You would need a thyroid status on the baby. And because the baby is microcephalic with hepatosplenomegaly, might be sepsis, but you would require a torch profile as well.
So the ECG showed sinus bradycardia, and this bradycardia and this hypothermia may be due to severe shock. Any prolonged hypoxia or a chronic hypoxia can lead to this. They can cause sinus, the nodal dysfunction. And the torch profile was sane. It was the report averted. Actually, the report came normal. Thyroid profile was also normal. He has a very stormy course in the PICU. There was prolonged bleeding from multiple puncture sites. The baby was going like in a coagulopathies. And CBG showed, CBC came down, the counts, total count came down, the hemoglobin came down, the platelet came down. So this was the report, as you can see. The platelet count came down to 46,000, hemoglobin 8.1, received a blood transfusion, become 10.3. Repeat CRP was 71.3, a little lower than the before. So now, what additional parameters you would like to say? Differentials. To summarize, this is the summarize. A prolonged fever, respiratory distress, hepatosplenomegaly, coagulopathy. So what are the differentials and how you will...
See, we are dealing with a very sick child now. The prolonged fever, hepatosplenomegaly, there is bicytopenia as well as, and there is coagulopathy. So most likely we are dealing with a child who is immunosuppressed. So maybe he has some immune deficiency syndrome, which has been precipitated by a secondary infection.
Okay.
I think
So
there could be
secondary infection, severe sepsis is one of the
secondly,
important.
there could be
So
a
underlying
disseminated-
IEM or immunodeficiency, as
Yes.
Dr. Debjani was trying to say.
There could be a disseminated tuberculosis as well, because
Yeah.
there's prolonged fever, hepatosplenomegaly. But although we don't have a family history of tuberculosis or the mother suffering from tuberculosis right now, and of course with bicytopenia with prolonged fever, we need to rule out HLS. It could be either familial or could be secondary HLS, which can be precipitated by the infection as well. And since there is setting of microcephaly with hepatosplenomegaly, we need to rule out TORCH syndrome and other infiltrative disorders.
So TORCH was ruled out. Tuberculosis, we didn't have a contact history. We thought of severe sepsis and others. So we went for an extensive investigation, malaria, scrub, everything, because baby was having very critical sickness at that moment at least. So all came out to be negative. Respiratory panel was also sent. It was negative. HLH marker was positive. So serum ferritin was sky high, 18,980 with a fibrinogen of 123. LDH very high, triglyceride very high, 627. So it is an HLH. How to confirm, sir?
So possibility of HLH is there. So there are some certain diagnostic criteria which are there that need to be fulfilled. And you may do bone marrow aspiration, which may help you, but it is not diagnostic. So there are certain criteria, and then if you are suspecting primary, then primary HLH, then of course the genetic testing is available, and there are certain types of genetic disorders. There are 4 or 5 types of them which are there, and in the next one is if we can look for the chronic infections also. I will be very interested to know that if this child received BCG, because the way the child has behaved,
Yes.
the possibility of SCID is very, very high.
Yes,
It's very high.
very high.
So I will definitely look into that diagnosis also. So many a time the BCG, after BCG, in patients with SCID, they have
Yes,
disseminated
yes.
tuberculosis.
So we had a case, sir, with multiple involvements. Sir.
Yes.
So we also suspected immunodeficiency. Along with this, actually, the workup for the tuberculosis was also done. Not surprisingly, because the X-ray was very suggestive of tuberculosis. The gastric lavage came positive. TAST was negative after 48 hours. It may be in such a cachectic child. And CSF study was within normal limit. And so now the diagnosis is quite clear, Dr. Debjani. So this is how would you say, how you will diagnose? What is your diagnosis right now?
Yeah, I think, well, the diagnosis has been shared. So on one hand, we have HLH parameters. On the other hand, we thought we were dealing with sepsis. That's been narrowed down. Gastric lavage shows CBNAT positive. So it's, I would put my bet on infection-associated HLH and would want to work a bit more as to what sort of a TB is it. Like it's, at the end of the day, the baby's been unwell for 1.5 months. So is it from the mother or perinatal acquired? So it needs a bit more workup to be done.
Okay, so we will also investigate for the parents. And how we will treat Dr. Partho?
This is the first, only with the CBNAT positive, with your CBNAT negative for meningitis. I think we'll go for ATT, but again we have a setting of HLS, so we have to start with dexamethasone as well.
Okay, so just to summarize, the bone marrow showed hemophagocytosis. We started with dexamethasone and also ATT. And as Dr. Debjani was telling, we worked up for the parental COX workup. Mother's TST came to be positive. Chest X-ray was normal. Father's was negative and chest X-ray was normal. So both were HIV negative. Even the baby was HIV negative. Mother was advised for endometrial curettage and to do one TB PCR after gynecological opinion. And to our surprise, the mother endometrial biopsy was suggestive of endometrial COX. So most likely this is a congenital tuberculosis where you have to have a proven tuberculosis lesion in the inflant plus any one of the following. Like lesions can occur in the first week of life or a primary hepatic complex because it goes through this, I am not going into the transfer, maternal genital tract tuberculosis or placental tuberculosis and exclusion of postnatal transmission by thorough investigation of contacts. Actually, I wanted to say the ways of transfer of tuberculosis for congenital, but due to lack of time, I'm just omitting this. Very
So
fast, we'll go to a fourth case.
Just 1 second. This is a very typical issue of an uncommon presentation of a common condition.
Yes.
So we have to keep our index of suspicion high. I don't know whether we carried on with the CBNAT very early on during the disease, or it was a hindsight thought that though a thought of a diagnosis of disseminated tuberculosis was there, we were probably a bit late in getting the CBNAT done.
Yes,
but in any case,
absolutely,
it
sir.
was done and ATD started and the child improved.
So the
So-
message should be, with such an X-ray, when the baby is not improving, you should think of tuberculosis, even in a younger child. And if you don't get even the history of contact history.
best part
And
is you-
sometimes the mothers are very missed, sir. We have
Usually
seen
you could get
congenital
it from the
tuberculosis.
endometrium.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we have seen congenital tuberculosis cases, the mothers didn't specifically say any having fever, mild fever, they just ignored and they came out to be positive. So very quickly, a 49 days old may be admitted with PICU at 8:30 a.m. With poor feeding, not passing urine for last 16 hours, dehydrated, in a shock condition, respiratory distress since last 12 hours. On admission, there was marked tachypnea, saturation only 70% in room air, marked grunting, suction, liver was 2 centimeter, heart rate was 188. So I have just due to lack of time, we are just saying all the things were done, what should be done. And this was the capillary blood gas, which shows 7.1 with a PCO2 of 47, PO2 46. Sir, your comment?
So this is a severe acidosis, and this is a mixed type of acidosis, as the bicarb is also pretty low,
Yes.
and the PCO2s are high. And there's a base deficit, and there is severe hypoxemia.
So, okay, this is severe hypoxemia, and would you like to, the X-ray is not very good quality, but would you like to comment on this?
So the X-ray is showing bilateral haze,
Yes.
though it's a underexposed film.
Yes, absolutely.
So
So
I
at,
think I will only say it is a bilateral haze in the lungs.
okay, and there was a falling saturation and the baby was put into the ventilator, and after, this is the X-ray after the tube in, and baby was stable on ventilator, the urine output started to come, but the blood gas at 12:30 was a little better, and the blood reports were suggestive of not of any infection. CRP was negative with a count of neutrophilic count of 58. Electrolytes was normal. There was the transaminase SGOT, SGPT was high, and BP started again fall, decreased urine output, poor perfusion. And what are the things you would like to do at this moment, Dr. Shumatro?
So
It's a very classic.
when the BP is falling and urine output is decreased, some sort of shock, cardiogenic shock should be suspected. It could be associated with sepsis also. So we have to manage in that line because there is a poor perfusion. So we need a ECG now.
So ECG and echo will be done, and meanwhile the baby was managed. Echo shows a dilated LALV, severe systolic dysfunction. The left ventricle ejection fraction was only 20%, moderate MR, so it's a medical emergency. And this is the echo finding. This is the parasternal short axis view, which shows it's difficult to, if you can see, this is the, look at this area. Oh, sorry. Oh, it's not again showing, I don't know. You can see the the coronary artery is originating from the pulmonary artery. This is the aorta, this is the pulmonary artery, and this is the ECG. So
The
we were
classical
wanting an ECG.
deep Q wave in the V6 and P5 and lead AV1 is the indicator of this kind of abnormality, that is L kappa.
So the diagnosis is already told by Dr. Shumatro. This was an Al kappa, and where the left coronary artery was originating from pulmonary artery. And this is if you have medical management, it will carry risk of 80 to 100% mortality. Immediately refer this case to a cardiac surgeon. And I would like to Dr. Manglik to say a few words
Thank you very
regarding
much for
this
those
case. Yeah.
wonderful patients, and all of them not very common ones, but still we do get them. Only the RSV one is one which we routinely see almost. The other ones we don't see, but we need to keep our eyes and ears open, high index of suspicions. Particularly the first one, your index of suspicion led you to the diagnosis of ciliary issues. And the other ones, tuberculosis also remains high on our thought process. The last one, yes, unless you remember that this is a possibility, this child comes in basically failure.
Yes.
So getting an echo and done, because that is primarily in practice what we do. Most of the time now we get rush for an echo. We don't get an ECG done because here the ECG tells you a very classical picture.
Classical.
So if you can get the ECG done straight away, that's not very difficult. The echo, you need a specialist to come. You may have the machine, but you don't have the manpower to be there at all points of time. So very well done. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The time factor is very important in the last case. So if you have a case like this, so be very alert and use all your resources to diagnose, because those are emergency. You cannot, the baby, if you let it be for the next day, the baby will not be there. So I would like to end that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kia, for such wonderful cases. And thanks to all our panelists, Dr. Manglik, Dr. Dipjani, Dr. Shumantro, Dr. Anil Sachdeva sir, and Dr. Partho.